All right, R2, welcome back. Good to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's man, I don't even know how long it's been, but as they say in NFT space, it's like a day feels like a week and a week feels like a month and so on and so on. So I guess we've
Yeah.
connected 3 years ago now, something like
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think it's 3 months, but yeah, it feels like 3 years. And
Oh, there you
looking
go.
back, looking back at that time, it feels like we were so naive about what was going to come. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I guess yeah, our time clocks have been properly reset in the world of NFTs. Then, if that was kind of the knee jerk, is
Yeah.
is 3 years. But yeah, you're so right, and I think that's the fun about these recordings is we just get to speculate on the information that we have in front of us and really just try to rub the magic 8 ball to see what happens in the future. So
Yeah.
anyway, really appreciate you jumping back in here.
Oh,
Um,
glad to be here.
one of one of the many things that you've been pretty active in talking to the community about is ASTO and really everything economy related. So I figure what might be a good use of our time today is to talk a little bit about ASTO, where it's been, where it's going, kind of our thoughts for the trajectory of the token, and all that good stuff. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Cool. So I guess the best place to begin would be talking about what ASTO will be used for that we know of. And refresh my memory. Were you familiar with Axie Infinity? Did you get involved in that world ever, or am I getting my wires crossed?
I'm familiar with it, but I never got involved in Axie Infinity.
Yeah, and I guess where my head's at is the commonality between Delphi Digital and really how much time was spent with ASTO and designing the tokenomic model of the altered state machine protocol. Um, my interpretation is that it's going to be a single token economy, right? That ASTO is
Mhm.
the token that is going to be used for a number of things as well as governance. Is that your interpretation as well, or did I miss some data along the way?
No, I think you're right. No, I mean, we have heard about some new alterations to the tokenomics per se about the ASTO energy. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not really a token per se, but um, the team have described in one of the more recent AMAs that if you stake your ASTO, you'll accumulate this energy, which you eventually expend to mine Gen 2 brains. And then potentially that energy will be used for other ASTO related use cases. And the benefit of that is that means you don't actually have to spend your ASTO, it's just staked and it's locked in a contract. But the longer it's staked, or the more ASTO that's staked, allows you to accumulate more of this ASTO energy. Um, so yeah, it's still a single token economy. It's just, I guess, another way of looking at it.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating how they're designing it, and I think we have limited information so far. So just looking back, um, what was it last? Well, I guess it was really just a couple months ago, at the turn of the new year, we were airdropped. Was it 7,152 ASTO tokens per Genesis brain?
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, everyone that received those tokens obviously were free to do with it what they will, but it seemed like a good chunk of the community participated in the liquidity bootstrap auction, which helped provide that deep liquidity pool that kind of lays the foundation for everything going forward. Do you recall that time in terms of what your thought process was, whether you participate in the LBA or
Yeah.
whether you just hold on to it? Take me back to that time.
Yeah, so I think at that time my feelings were that I would participate maybe 50% or something like that, and then keep the rest um, where just I guess not staking in the LP.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I got closer to the time, I guess I was getting quite bullish. So then I probably went about 80% of my tokens into that, and then kept some outside of the actual LP, just so I had that extra bit of flexibility. And one of those things that I've kind of learned over time is to try not to go all in something, just because you never know what's going to happen. And yeah, so probably in the end I probably should have gone 50%, but I think happy with everything anyway.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how everyone has, or theoretically has, their thesis, and they're like, okay, I'm going to stick to my guns. Like, this is my plan. And then all the community discussions start to accelerate, and that FOMO starts to set in, and you're like, okay, well, am I missing a big opportunity by not, putting it all on black or whatever? And, like people are talking about. So yeah, I can understand how your risk, or, the allocation from 50% to 80 happened. Definitely felt the same. Cool. So that event took place, you participated in it. Did you, since then we've been earning rewards, which we can claim weekly. Have you been just leaving them be, or have you been taking any action on the reward tokens that you've been receiving along the way?
Yeah, so I think I took some out. I can't remember because I have a couple wallets, but I think I took a little bit out for the Atom Car Club NFT launch. So I think I needed just a bit extra. I needed to sort of cash out some rewards and then use them to purchase the Atom Car Club NFTs. But otherwise, I haven't cashed out any more than that. And actually, in fact, I at one stage bought more ASTO as the price was going down, and in also subsequently also sold some as well. But I haven't actually touched any of the rewards, or I guess the initial airdrop is still locked anyway.
Right. And that kind of takes us fast forward to what you had mentioned around the ASTO energy and what's involved there. So I guess not to jump around too much, but how did you, we'll get to the ASTO energy and the Atom Car Club piece, because I think all of those are really important factors that jump into this. But how did you make that decision? How did you evaluate ASTO? What is your, this is what success looks like scenario for ASTO that you're kind of measuring things against?
I mean, I think where I envisage where the whole project, I guess, my benchmarks are where I think the project can go. And I think I'm constantly reevaluating how big this project will be. Initially my feelings were, oh, this is just a gaming project. Well, not just, but it's a gaming project. And then next it's, well, they're going to launch 3 games. And then actually we're starting to see that they have plans for it to be significantly bigger than that. And gaming is sort of that Trojan horse that gets people interacting with the AI, something that's understandable and fun. And then from there, they've got the other, the metaverse characters, and then I think DeFi related projects. So really, it's really hard to sort of put a cap on where the project can go, because as we know, AI is such a huge part of where the world is going. I mean, the use cases, I mean, we might not actually even understand some of the use cases, or the team, I'm sure, have not probably talked about all the things that they're planning. So at its base case, I see this, if it's a successful project, that Altered State Machine has 3 successful games, and has hopefully tens or hundreds of thousands of users, because it sounds like we already know that we have sought after intellectual property with the Muhammad Ali game that's coming out. And it sounds like there's a few more things installed. The team have already mentioned a partnership with a major sporting league, and that could be a Fluff World related partnership, but it has been also mentioned or hinted at in ASM AMAs as well. So possibly it's an ecosystem, but also involves ASM, or maybe just ASM, and maybe we are creating a game for that. Who knows? But
Yeah.
because of that, for this, in my mind, this being successful, yeah, like I said, it could be a multi-million-dollar sort of market cap project, and because of that, it's also the hard part of, okay, what are the goals, or what are the targets do I set myself, and knowing, okay, well, this is where I'd like to take profit, and it's a really hard thing to sort of establish, as
Yeah.
we're still being drip fed, you know, information about altered state machine or the futureverse, and it's becoming clear that they've got much bigger plans than most people have been thinking about so far.
Yeah. Or been able to wrap our heads around, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, do you have I guess a lot of activity in other tokens or other, like, I guess, project economies, or are you pretty consolidated into the Fluff World ASM
Yeah.
system?
Like you'll probably see with a lot of people that are hanging out in the Discord, I'm pretty much mostly, I think 80-90% now into the sort of Fluff World ecosystem. Heavily involved in other projects sort of early on during the bull run, and only sort of discovered and stumbled onto the Fluff ecosystem and ASM late in 2021. But after sort of, you know, being red pilled and seeing the quality that this project keeps putting out, and the partnerships that it's establishing, I have now consolidated. So I do have a couple other, in terms of NFTs, you know, investments in like Moonbirds and CloneX, so other sort of blue chippy type projects, but
Yeah,
far and
I
away
remember
from,
you've got a knack for that. Finding, you're either really lucky with your minting, or you can really assess the winners and ride them up, huh?
yeah, and you know, I've, you know, had similar feelings, and actually, you know, when I go through the Discord, I see what the team puts out. Like, I think what you know, the Fluff ecosystem is putting out is by far and away the best,
Yeah.
and it just probably hasn't achieved the same recognition as some of those other projects yet, and that's probably because of timing. But you know, I have so much confidence in the team, that their time will come. And I think, you know, going back to what you were saying about Axie Infinity, Axie Infinity is one of those projects. So I did keep an eye on about it. I remember do some research, and you know, hearing that they had like several thousands, or you know, tens of thousands of people that were playing the game, and people that were earning their, you know, daily livings, especially in countries like the Philippines. And I was thinking, oh, that's really good fundamentals, and I was keeping an eye on the token. I may have even bought a little and sold a little. I can't remember. Like back then, I was sort of in and out of a lot of different projects, but you know, it kind of made sense that it would do well, and it, you know, lo and behold,
Yeah.
it eventually did. Eventually, it did catch on,
Yeah.
and when I look at this, even though we haven't necessarily had the user acquisition yet, we haven't really had the games released. Everything so far, it looks like it can go down that trajectory, and you know, build in a bear market, and you just have to kind of be able to hold on and not get shaken out.
Yeah, I'm taking the same view as you had just mentioned, and I think, at least from what I gather in the Discord, a lot of folks are doing that. You know, Axie Infinity was the pioneer. I think it kind of set the stage for a lot of what's possible, both just observing something in its infancy and what it could look like at rapid scale. And of course, there are some, you know, lessons learned on the way back down, as well, as they're in this kind of lull, I guess we could call it. But what I'm getting at is, it seems like it's a good sort of barometer to measure against other projects. And so, you know, when I was thinking about, well, how do you properly evaluate ASTO? You see things like people asking about what the vesting schedule is. You see people asking about, what the burn mechanics are, or ways to spend ASTO, what those might be, and how many total tokens are out there, what is the release schedule for those things. I think people try to apply like a total market cap to a project like this, and to your point earlier, it's really tough to assess many of those variables. So it's kind of just almost gut feel, it seems to me, in a lot of ways, just making sure that it's trending toward what they're setting out to do, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think one of my feelings are as well, like, I think it's safe to say we're in a bear market. And I think in crypto especially, because, it's not like in the traditional markets where companies are putting out revenue numbers or releasing what their assets are valued at. So you can't sort of fall back on traditional valuation mechanics. And I think in a bull market, it's all well and good. People will say, oh, well, this project, this other gaming company is worth a $1 billion market cap. Oh, well, then this is what our project could sort of achieve as well. And people sort of put those targets. But I think in a bear market, it all doesn't matter really. I mean, at the moment, I think Alt State Machine, the token, the market cap is probably like 15 million. I mean, it kind of just doesn't really mean anything, I feel. If you said that 1 year ago, given what we know about the project, the partnerships and everything that it's trying to do, what 15 million is an absolute bargain. So it's so hard to place a value on these things. And I think it's a tough thing to do, but potentially in a bull market, or potentially once we have the games released and we can say, oh, we have X number of users, or the project is making X number of revenue or total value locked, then I guess you kind of start to establish some metrics to work from.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of my thought too, and perhaps it's just my newness to crypto in general, but in looking at Altered State Machine as a startup, it's really, it's kind of like getting access to a stock pre-IPO, and without having worked for the company. So when we look at the price points of things in the very short term, when we're talking months at a time, it's almost irrelevant, because it's just, where do you want your starting point to be? And then when you look forward to all of the things that it's going to actually start being burned for, then it's kind of like we're in the waiting area, and every sort of fluctuation is just kind of a slightly different impact to how you get started. But one thing we saw is, I think David in the Discord mentioned, when asked about the Gen 2 brains, that the initial mining event will result in 100,000 Gen 2 brains, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, which is, really puts that market cap, like you were talking about, in perspective, because it's so small right now compared to where they see it going. And if that's just the initial wave, we're in for a treat, because there's 10,000 Gen 1 brains with 40,000 AFA characters. So that leaves 30,000, forms that are going to need a brain. So that's where at least 30,000 of those 100,000 Gen 2 brains are going to be, coming from. So, yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm going with this is just looking ahead to now, like you mentioned, what are the milestones that we want to just be observing that would determine this being continue to be a healthy project? So ways to spend ASTO. It seems like the genome mining event is kind of the next up, and they started, hinting at how that's going to occur. The incentivization for LP participants, for those of us that participated in the LBA, we can still participate in that genome mining event, and kind of play a bit of catch up. The 8-time car club, the way that folks minted the Genesis ATEM Car Club membership was, by spending ASTO to do that. So we're already seeing, kind of the interoperable nature of this ecosystem, and some of the ways initially that ASTO is going to be burnt, right, or spent.
Yeah, exactly. It's and probably just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's no indication of what the spend dynamics are going to be for the next Legends, but if a big part of that game seems to be kind of building out your character, then I would imagine in order to level up, in other games you think about like crafting, if that notion were to translate into the next Legends, figuring out how you might create the character form or strengths that you're after, there's probably going to be some ASTO spend involved there. So yeah, I'm just thinking about what the most immediate needs for ASTO are going to be.
And I think there's going to be an opportunity to start training our characters or our
Mm-hmm.
forms, or sorry, our AI rather, because I think from memory, Genesis brain holders will get first access to the AFA game in the beta. So then there'll be training for that, possibly breeding as well for the All Stars as well. Because yeah, all indications is the team have been really bullish about the fact that they think that 40,000 All Stars is not going to be enough. Which I'm guarded about that. Obviously, I'm very bullish, but until I can see like how they can be so bullish about it, maybe I'm assuming it's to do with the partnerships that they've got,
Mm-hmm.
that they think they're going to be able to acquire that many players. But yeah, so I think so you've got extra mints coming up with the next Legends, and then I guess also in the Atom Car Club economy as well, people are going to be making tracks, assume modifying cars, and probably ASTO needs to be spent to do that, and then entering competitions, possibly, and then I'm assuming then it also needs to be training in gyms for the actual car club as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is quite a few things. It's just a matter of how soon they are, and also there is if you look at the roadmap, it says that there's a special something special happening with the fluff ecosystem, and I'm not sure if that's being able to put your brain into the fluffs and they're able to go into the burrows, but that's also if you look at the roadmap, that's after genome mining.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe here, that's a good call. I've got it pulled up. I'll just kind of zip through the roadmap to date. So initially we had the ASM AFA Genesis drop. That was where, folks minted boxes. Then we had the ASM AFA Great Unboxing. That was where it was revealed that each box contained one brain and 4 AFA characters, and you got to see kind of what those were. They launched the DAO. They provided the ASTO airdrop. Then they built out that ASTO liquidity. They made the announcement for the next Legends. And then we so those are the things that are completed to date. And now we get into, what happens next on this particular roadmap. And as we know with NFT projects, things can get fine-tuned and, shuffled around slightly. But here they have up next is AFA team creation, which is to get your all-stars together in gangs of 4 so that they can get to know each other. I think that they're hinting there at, like you were just talking about with the gym training, that they've seen more interactions between characters have an impact on performance rather than just individuals, training in isolation. So yeah, I'd be curious to see what happens there. Then shortly after that, we've got ASM genome mining. That's where we stake ASTO to assemble Gen 2 brains, and that's usable across the ASM powered metaverse. So as you mentioned earlier, I think staking is a really important word there, because people from here, basically, we've had very limited sort of a decision paths to go down. One was, do you want to participate in the LBA with your tokens or not? And then if you didn't, do you want to sell those tokens and kind of trade around the, fluctuations of the pricing or not, or just hold on to it? And then do you want to use those ASTO tokens to mint ATEM, or are you going to bring in external capital to do so or not? And those, as like hard as it is at the time, I feel like those are the easy decisions, because then when we get into genome mining and intelligence mining, which we'll talk about in a second, it's more nuanced in terms of how are you maximizing the power of your ASTO, like you mentioned with genome mining, which is basically generating Gen 2 brains using ASTO. We're theoretically staking that ASTO rather than just spending it to buy brains, right? So am I thinking about that right? Like, I think the staking word is a really important differentiator there.
Yeah, you're not having to spend your ASTO, you're just having it locked in a contract and then accumulating this ASTO energy. And then I guess after you have an adequate amount, you're able to mine a Gen 2 brain.
Yeah, so really interested to see how the community responds to that activity. And then I would imagine that once we get the hang of it, we'll learn about the ASTO energy. We'll start to see people going back to that previous roadmap step, which is AFA team creation. I know that they're listing AFA team creation, but the reality is that the forms are forms, right? We know, or we've been told previously, that the thought process was that each AFA character, the form itself won't impact the performance of the gameplay. It's really how the brains are interacting with one another. So once the genome mining occurs and we start to ratchet up toward the 100,000, Gen 2 brain pool that David is envisioning, there's going to be a lot of secondary trading, to assemble the team that you think is the most well-rounded to compete. So I think that's where the game is really afoot.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it all plays out. And it'll be wondering, just talking about the decisions that people have to make if you have other use cases that are coming up, and where they'll choose to use their ASTO energy. And I guess also splicing, or was the old term intelligence mining, or was that the old term that we used?
I forget what the winner was, but
splicing.
Tell more about that.
So splicing is definitely the winner from the competition. So that's using two Genesis brains to breed together to produce, for I guess lack of a better word, a baby brain, which will have a combination of the parent's genome and any training that they've had, plus a little bit of randomness as well. But I guess by and large, it should be the offspring should be a reflection of the both parent brains. So you would only choose to really breed or splice to Genesis brains once they've had a bit of training, because I think that's where the real value add is. I mean,
right,
we're still unsure how IQ really affects things, and that's a little bit up in the air. So even if you put two high IQ brains together, it's unclear what that significance will be. So really, it's the training, I think, that probably matters more at this stage.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that's sort of the less talked about factor for success, especially if David has described the gamification of AFA primarily being in the training, and which knobs and dials you turn to result in the best outcomes. And then the game itself is really just kind of a justification, or rather validation of your thoughts. I would imagine a lot of time is going to be spent in, the UI of that, and kind of how we interact with the
Mm.
assets that we have. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. If there's 100,000 Gen 2 brains, then, and there's only 40,000 AFA characters, and they want to see a lot of, players right now, there can only be 10,000 game participants. So I would imagine that there's going to be some ASTO spent to breed your AFA, all stars,
Yes.
to expand that. Like you mentioned, the Fluff and ASM, that very special collaboration with the friends at Fluff
Yeah.
World.
Mm.
Who knows what's going on there?
Yeah.
Shortly after that, we've got AFA intelligence mining, and this is going back to what we were just talking about, which is, how do you maximize the training? I would imagine that's going to be where a lot of ASTO is spent, is in the gyms, and kind of investing into your brains that way.
Yeah.
And then we've got,
no, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I thought you were waiting for me to say something. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm sure we could do an entire session on the
Yeah.
training once it's released. Personally, it's all unfamiliar territory to me. So I'm just going to be waiting to see what they share with us, and then just kind of as quickly as possible react to that, and kind of create a strategy around it. But I don't know what to expect from the memory tree and the sort of training experience. What do I want to wager when I'm participating in some of these tournaments? Things like that. It's going to be really fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds pretty high tech. The fact that you can go into your memory tree and delete parts out of it if you weren't happy with things.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it really does. Then the AFA preseason goes live, and that's again the 4-on-4 football game. That's the first game that the ASM team is releasing natively, along with the Next Legends and Burn Down. And then it says AFA game season 1. So, rewinding all the way back to how did we get on the roadmap topic, I think it was, we were talking about, what milestones do we need to be looking for along the way to ensure that ASTO is healthy and, kind of doing what it's designed to do. Like you've thought about, how far along are these games and what is the timeline for that, right? Do you have any sort of expectations or hopes rather of when these, when at least AFA will be released?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to tell, because I think on the original roadmap, the beta was supposed to come for AFA in Q1. And only until recently, in an AMA, they said they're hopeful for by Christmas for the game release. And I'm not sure if that's beta or a fully fledged game. I'm not sure. The one thing I will say is, having been involved in other projects and listening to AMAs and project founders saying that a lot of crypto game projects they often put out a certain roadmap, but then once they get into the nitty gritty of making the project and also implementing things like crypto rails, it all of a sudden becomes a lot harder than they initially anticipated. So I'm not sure if that's happened with AFA. Probably also, they've pivoted from it being a proof of concept to a fully fledged game as well. I'm sure that's also changed things. And look, at the end of the day, there's no point just coming out with a game for the sake of it. Everyone wants a successful game, so they should just take as much time as they need to. But yeah, I'm hoping that we do get something before the end of the year. I'm hoping we get beta sometime maybe in Q3. And I assume that would be the case. If you think about it, genome mining starts in about, I think we're going to get an announcement in the next 1 or 2 weeks about genome mining. That's going to start before the LBA finishes, and LBA should finish in about 3 weeks time, I think. Now, I think, or I remember from an AMA that it's probably going to take about 60 days for people get enough ASTO energy, or sorry, yeah, to accumulate enough ASTO energy to mine the first Gen 2 brains. So if I'm thinking 2.5 months from here, if people are starting to get Gen 2 brains, it kind of makes sense that there's going to be a use case for them. Otherwise, you're just going to have all these Gen 2 brains flooding in. So I'm hoping that maybe in 2.5 months' time, either we get the Fluff collaboration, or maybe beta is launched and we can start, or maybe training starts becoming available, so we can start putting the Gen 2 brains to use. Because I guess the worst case scenario would be you get a whole bunch of Gen 2 brains being released onto the market and no game or use case several months away. So I'm thinking that they did mention early on that they're kind of on this really strict timeline, that things, one as a domino, one thing needs to sort of click for the other. So I'm hoping that's the case as those sort of Gen 2 brains come onto the market. Maybe it's the game, or maybe it's the Fluff collaboration, or maybe it's something we don't know about.
Yeah, I think that's a really well-rounded way of kind of assessing the current state, and working backwards from what we do know and what they've said around the importance of kind of things clicking. So yeah, that I can't think of a better way to just kind of wait and see how things unfold. But you're right. I mean, if we look at the activity, or rather the pricing behavior of ASTO, it's been really small spikes when there's a reason to use it. Like there was an increase when they announced that ATEM would be minting with ASTO, and price went up a little bit there. But otherwise, it's really just kind of that slow and steady sell downward. So I would imagine they're going to have to stick to that strict timeline that they'd set for themselves in order to make sure all of this comes together the way that they intended. So I want to be mindful of your time. Anything else that you've got a real burning need to talk about? I know we didn't even touch on Futureverse, so maybe we can kind of pick up there next time. But anything else before we depart today?
I think we're in a very interesting time in terms of ASTO price. It's been kind of mainly down only. Like you said, except with those spikes for the Atom Car Club NFT launch and things like that. But with genome mining about to launch, and I guess a whole host of announcements coming. I think David teased on the Discord today that there's maybe, I think, 8 ecosystem major announcements in the next couple months. We potentially could be getting towards the bottom, and there's been quite severe crypto price action in the last, I guess, couple of weeks.
We haven't even
days.
Addressed that, but that's a good call. The macro factors, right? Yeah.
So I mean, I guess it's really hard to know which way it will go. I would say that there's actually some great fundamental drivers coming for the ASTO token, but we can't control what happens in the macro, what happens in crypto as a whole. So it's really hard to know. But potentially we could be getting close to a bottom. But I'm not willing to bet on that at the moment. But hopefully this could be the bottom. It's at least we see some stability. I think that will be nice. And if more people are staking to mine Gen 2 brains, then it gives people less incentive to sell. Because right now there actually isn't a reason to not sell it, other than if you just believe in the project.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's a really good summary. Well, I think that's a good stopping point. We should absolutely keep this conversation going as we get closer to some of those activities here on the horizon. But R2, thank you again so much for taking your day off to talk with me, and we'll be watching closely.
Cheers, mate. Great to have a chat.
Talk to you soon.
I'll see you around.
All right, take care. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.